is gone.
KPCA LP, Petaluma, California.
Achoo!
Hello, 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 Petaluma.
Achoo!
Hey, cut that out.
Somebody's got a cold, and it ain't me.
Yeah, well, who do you think that is then?
It must be you, Matt McGuire.
Oh, my God.
One of the Mooks of Two Mooks and a Mic.
Isn't that too much information, Jim Thomas, other Mook of Two Mooks and a Mic?
Heck no. You're sitting way on the other side of the studio, and I'm not coming near you. I'm not touching you with a 10-foot Achoo Kleenex.
Thanks for sharing.
Yeah, right. That's all
Hey,
right.
Petaluma, it's Friday, it's noon,
Friday.
it's lunchtime. Here we are, Two Mooks and a Mic,
Yes.
back again.
Yeah, special edition of Two Mooks and a Mic,
Hey,
Matt.
listen, we've got two very special guests here with us in the studio today.
Yeah.
We have got Therese Mughannam and Sam Tuttleman, and we're going to be talking about Palestine and Israel, a topic that is loaded with stuff that people need to hear about.
Yes, that's absolutely right. I don't think we get enough information in our little bubble here in the United States. So
we don't.
It's
typically.
really good. So we're going to have to talk really fast, Matt, and do a few things quickly and get out of the way so
that's
these two
right.
people
So,
can talk.
You know, listeners, of course, you know, Jim and I can blather on about politics and
One of
stuff
us
all
can.
day long.
One of us just sort of like, okay. I'm not saying who either.
You know, I think you're talking too much over there.
Yeah, it's my 15th cup of coffee that's doing it, Matt. Yeah.
I see. Yeah. Well, so of course it's been another wild week, and things, are crazy in the world that we live in.
Right.
You know, where do you want to start? I mean,
I want to start to move to New Zealand. That's where I want to go.
Yeah, New Zealand. Isn't that amazing? So there was the horrible slaughter in the two mosques, and yet the Prime Minister has stepped right up as a true leader and done the right thing.
Yes, she has.
She has said that they are, and in fact they are moving ahead and are going to ban all assault weapons,
Praise be.
all high capacity magazines.
Yep. And she can do it, and she has the backing of her government to do it.
That's right. Both parties on the right and the left support this.
Yeah.
No bump stocks, nothing like that.
No, and after the slaughter, Matt, there are pictures of her going to comfort those people, the survivors, the relatives of the victims, and she had her head covered in respect. She was hugging people of both sexes, and she did a National Day of Mourning, and she also encouraged people from around the world to come and worship with them, with the Muslims there.
That's right.
And she also said armed guards at all mosques until further notice.
Yeah, so Prime Minister Jacinta Ardern is a real leader in the world.
Yes, she is.
And she said on the gun, she said the time to act is now.
Yep, thank you.
And certainly, she said that she called for a national call to prayer
that was the day
on
morning,
Friday,
right? That's
which
right.
is, I think,
That's their
a
Sabbath,
little ahead of us on the date time.
They're a day ahead, yeah.
Yeah, so, and thousands of people showed up for it. They broadcast it on TV and radio. They had 2 minutes of silence, and they, she basically, she says, New Zealand mourns for you. We are one.
Wow.
And the people of the country seem to be, backing that up strongly.
Absolutely.
It's a beautiful thing to see out of a horrible, horrible event.
As opposed to our so-called leader after Charlottesville, who said they're good people on both sides, and basically didn't do anything until his feet were put to the fire.
And who was cited as an icon by the murderer who killed the people in the mosque.
84-page manifesto, right? And they're saying that where Trump has had his rallies, that there's more incidents of violence wherever he goes.
That's right, yeah. Well, so... maybe he wouldn't be there if we didn't have the Electoral College. It's nice to see that the Democrats, at least, are actually stepping up and saying, you know what, this is not representational government. We need to either get rid of it or bypass it. Now, it's going to be hard to get rid of it because it's in the Constitution.
Yeah, so it's going to have to have an amendment.
It takes 2/3 of Congress.
And one of the problems with that is, as my 8th grade civics teacher told me, that once you open it up to change the Constitution, you can put in anything. So it's a very slippery slope. You have to really know what you're doing and trust the people who are doing this.
Yeah, and that's one of the dangers where the right wing keeps calling for a constitutional convention to address our larger issues.
Yeah.
But there is the effort by states to bypass, and a number of states, including California, have signed on to that, where
Good.
they say that they will allocate their electoral college votes based on the popular vote.
So they can. It's a workaround without having to go through Congress and
change the
yes,
Constitution.
That's really smart.
Yeah. So that's really good.
Yay, California.
Little bit of good news. There was a second guilty verdict that said glyphosate, the main ingredient in Roundup, does indeed cause cancer.
Fan my brow, Matt.
Yeah, how about that? Now the guy that in this case was a local Sonoma County guy.
That's right. Yeah, from
I just don't understand why he would use that stuff for 30 years without thinking that some, poison manufacturer might not be giving him the full story on the safety of that
Well,
product.
Matt, maybe he's thinking it's convenient. Squirt it on, come back the next day, and the things are dead.
Yeah, exactly. Well, so, we're glad to see that, because it is poisonous and nobody should be using Roundup.
Even though Monsanto said it's not, just like the guy who drank DDT to prove that it's safe. I don't know whatever happened to him.
Died.
He died, which we all will happen to all of us.
Yeah. And then, the erstwhile tangerine turd in the White House has said that...
Twitler.
He signed an executive order that requires U.S. colleges receiving federal grant monies to protect the First Amendment
I'm
and
so
free
glad.
speech.
There has not been free speech on campuses ever.
For years,
No.
there's no free speech.
Even before Berkeley.
Yeah,
free
well,
speech movement.
You know what? That this is just going to be used as another bludgeon to suppress, liberal left-wing thought, and to promote, the anti-abortionist, the religion in
Matt,
school types, all
got to
that sort of
stop
stuff.
that. Hey, Matt, by the way, there is a movement to Pete Buttigieg, who is running for U.S. presidency.
Yes.
He is advocating appointing 2 more Supreme Court justices.
Oh, yeah.
Other people are coming on board to do the same thing, to balance out what's happening with the right-wing Brett Kavanaugh and the
The stuffing
guy.
of the Supreme Court with
stuffing,
right-wing
Like turducken.
zealots.
Right, exactly.
Well, I'm all for that.
They're trying to do Ninth Circuit, too.
And exactly. Well, and then the Trump has appointed more appeals court judges and circuit court judges than anybody.
That's Mitch McConnell.
Yeah. So, and then of course Jared Kushner and Ivanka are being, Elijah Cummings, the head of the House Oversight and Reform Committee, says that they have been using private messaging services to do White House business.
No.
Yeah, you'd think after all the
Lock him up.
onslaught of Hillary's email server that they would at least have some rational wit not to be such morons.
They are morons. They're a bunch of idiots. Jared is using WhatsApp, which is a messaging service used through Microsoft Word and Facebook. And apparently with WhatsApp, if you write something on that, it can't be traced. So we don't know what he's been doing with Saudi Arabia, but apparently there has been talks to give Saudi Arabia the capability of nuclear power,
they
which
wanted
can
to
be turned
promote
into
a little
nuclear
business opportunity.
weapons.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Good
Well,
stuff.
so let's get to our guest.
Let's
I do
get
want
out
to
of the
just
way.
say one more quick thing.
Okay, quickly.
Devin Nunes is suing his cow.
Devin Nunes cow on Twitter.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, and that's a fake Twitter
Poor
site
baby.
that pretending to be his cow and pointing out his hypocrisy. And when they had about 1,200 followers, so he's suing for $250 million.
Yeah, $250,000. Right, $250 million. Right.
And so now there's like 450,000 followers.
Yeah, and
good work, Devin.
The whole reason why it's Devin Nunes cow is because he had a farm in California, but then moved his cattle ranch to where? Ohio, I think it was?
Iowa.
Okay, so to pay less taxes and to still get government subsidies as a quote-unquote farmer.
Yeah.
So Devin Nunes is being busted because he was the one doing the anti-frivolous lawsuits last year, I believe. And guess what? This is kind of a frivolous lawsuit.
You think?
Yeah. So he's having a rally in Fresno coming up, I think the beginning part of April, end of March. People are encouraged to show up wearing cow uniforms, mooing, and cowbells. So let's sock it to him.
Well, there you go, folks. All right.
Move on.
There's a lot more to talk about, but we really want to get to our guests.
this is
So
important.
we want to introduce Therese Mughannam. Did I say it closely, Therese?
Yes.
And, of course, Sam Tuttleman. Now, Sam, you've been on the show before. These are a couple of activists in our community who enrich our lives through their efforts.
Absolutely.
And Therese, let's just start with you. Do you want to give us a little quick background on, who you are, how you got here, what's going on?
Okay, so I am Palestinian by birth. I was
Okay.
born in Jerusalem in 1947, a few months before the United Nations decided to divide Palestine and give 56% of it to the new Jewish people, the Jewish state.
The Israeli state.
The Israeli state, right. So, of course, the Palestinians were not negotiated with or consulted or anything like that. And
Right.
so
Just taken
they
from them.
rebelled. They was just divided.
Yeah.
It's like there's nobody there. It was said, although there were...
They're merely Arab people,
they're-
get them out of the way.
Right. So... Of course, civilians like my family were caught in the middle of the war that resulted
Yes.
because of this. Because, what human being would just sit aside and take it if their land and their properties were snatched away from
Their
them?
towns
They
and their
wouldn't, yeah.
cities and their
And their
villages.
villages, about 800,000 people had
Yeah.
to be displaced so that the Israelis would have this part of the best part of
course, the best
historical Palestine.
Yeah.
And
So
about 515 villages, I believe, were also destroyed at the time. And so there was a war.
Yeah.
And my dad at the time was a teacher. We lived not very far from Jerusalem. I was born in Jerusalem, but we were living not very far, about 6 miles away in Ramallah. My dad came home one day and he said to my mother, "Get the kids ready. We have to leave."
Wow.
And I was the youngest of 5 children at the time. And he had witnessed, he had seen, he had heard on his way home the massacre at Deir Yassin, which, a village of about over 100 people were just lined up and basically massacred, to frighten people so that they can flee. And it worked because we fled.
Yeah,
Like so
and
many-
they were massacred.
They were
by
massacred
Jewish
by
forces,
the terrorists, the Irgun and what's the other one?
Stern Gang.
The Stern
which
Gang.
were Zionist
Yeah.
paramilitary, I guess you'd call them.
Left over
Yeah.
from the war, perhaps, or funded by the
Well-
United States?
No, this happened during the what Palestinians call the Nakba and what Israelis call the War of Independence.
Yeah.
Okay. all
Right, and the Nakba is what, as you said, Sam, is what the Palestinians call it, and that means catastrophe. The word Nakba means catastrophe.
Yes.
So we fled. I mean, who wouldn't?
Right,
You
what are
you
you
grab
gonna
your
do?
kids.
You're fleeing for your life.
And
Hands on
right,
gun.
so we went across the river, to another country, basically Jordan. And we're there for a bit, and my dad saw the writing on the wall, and so we never went back. And soon he, as I said, he was a teacher, and so he was able to find a part-time job, which became a full-time job, and
That
we
was
stayed.
in Jordan.
This was in Jordan, in Amman, Jordan, which is the capital today.
Okay.
And so that's what I remember as a kid. And so I was there until I was 10 and a half years old.
Okay.
And then we came to America.
Yes.
So basically, it's not a unique story for Palestinians, for so many Palestinians, but it's not a well-known story.
Right.
And I think that this is the context behind which all of this stuff is happening, but we never talk, or hardly ever talk about
Right.
that context.
The public story is that, oh, look, the Jews got a homeland.
Yes,
And it's
that
like-
they deserve the homeland.
Yeah,
right?
and that they're entitled to a homeland,
Right.
and it's not. But don't look over there at all those hundreds of thousands of people being driven out of their homes
They
and
were
murdered.
displaced.
Yeah.
And how the Palestinians feel about that. I mean, the horrible history of the Jewish people and their suffering and persecution
Right.
at the hand of Christians, not
Yeah,
Muslim. And
that's
I'm
right.
a Christian. So I don't say that. I don't say that lightly. But it was not the Muslims who were
Who did that
who
to
had
them.
persecuted the Jewish people through the centuries, and of course culminating in the Holocaust. And so I mean, rightly, the sympathy had to be with the suffering people, the
Yes,
Jewish
that's right.
people.
Yeah.
But how Palestinians feel, it's like, how come we have to pay the price?
Yeah.
Of
Why
that
do we
horrible-
become the victims?
That's right. I mean, why do we have to? Why is our land taken away to give them?
choice
It was Germany, obviously, and Europe, and the anti-Semitism in Europe, and people. Even to this day, a lot of people think that Arabs are anti-Semites. Well, I am a Semite.
Uh-huh.
Being an Arab, I am a Semite.
That's
Jews
a
and
tribe
Arabs.
from the area.
Jews and Arabs are from the same stock.
And
so
Christians
we
too.
are.
They're
Yeah.
the same from Abraham. It's all have
Exactly.
the
I mean,
common book.
even racially, before you even add the religious part, we are Semites.
And a lot of this was perpetrated by the British. And
Don't even mention the British.
at the
Go
end of the
ahead.
war
They're carving up.
because certainly it's like colonialist, the old trick. Oh yeah, they they're fighting for their land. Oh, we're going to give them land, but we're going to like give this tribe that land that wasn't theirs, and that tribe this land that wasn't theirs. So they'll constantly be fighting to get back to their own land.
Same thing with India and Pakistan.
Yeah, it's
Same
just
thing.
like divide and conquer.
Right.
That's right.
That's right.
So
that's right.
We see how
And-
that's played out over the decades.
Yeah, not
And
very well.
it was also really, I mean, honestly, an effort to get rid of the Jews in Europe.
Oh,
Send them
yeah.
away.
Give 'em
Send
a
them
place to
away. I
go.
mean,
So
that's
it's-
where the
right,
anti-Semitism
yeah.
really is. In with the Europeans, just send them away and let Palestine.
Perfect.
And of course, it was Zionism started in the 1890s.
Yeah.
And, where Jewish people decided, Herzl, as the leader, decided, we need a place. We've been persecuted.
Yeah.
And it was the time when all kinds of people were colonizing. The French were colonizing in Africa
Yeah.
and other places,
Right.
and the British were. And so this was a whole movement colonizing Palestine for the Jewish people. But it was the British who really gave it a real push.
Yeah.
With the Balfour
The
Declaration
Balfour
and
Declaration,
so on.
that's
To
right.
get the Palestinians out.
So fast forward to today, we're dealing with this horrible, human, crisis, and it's just getting more and more ugly. Certainly, I mean, you see things like Trump just yesterday saying that, Israel that captured the Golan Heights in the War of 1967, which the UN and international law says is an illegal occupation. Trump is now saying, oh, well, that belongs to Israel. It's theirs, critical to their security, right? And Israel, of course, is the 800-pound gorilla in the Middle East. They have nuclear weapons.
Thanks to us.
They have a huge army. It's like
Thanks to
the
us.
third largest army in the world. We give them over $1 billion a year.
We support them.
In ammunition and weaponry alone.
It's 3.8 billion.
It's up to
Each
3.8.
year. Per year.
$3.8 billion
Wow.
a year. It comes to about 10 million a day, basically, of
Yeah.
our tax dollars.
Boy, well, that's an obscene.
Wow.
Think of what we could do with that money.
Exactly.
Our schools
and
our
hospitals,
and
bridges,
roads.
building
Infrastructure, right,
bridges,
exactly.
and
Healthcare.
And when you're in the West Bank, you'll see tear gas shells that are made in the United States.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Erie,
Wow.
Pennsylvania.
It used to be care boxes.
Well,
Yeah,
Sam,
no, these are.
yeah.
now Sam, you're a Jew that supports Palestinian rights and the struggle
Correct.
for their pursuit of justice. Tell us how you got involved in that, and as a Jew, how did you come to this position?
So I'm also was born in 1947, although I was born in the Bronx in New York City. All four of my grandparents came from the Pale of Settlement in Eastern Europe, where most of the Eastern European Jews were congregated. And they left for two reasons. One was because of anti-Semitism, the pogroms, the attacks that took place.
On a routine basis.
Yeah. And the second was economic opportunity. Now, interestingly enough, they were all Zionists, but
really?
they didn't go to Israel. And, you have to think about why did so many Jews come to the United States instead of going to Israel?
Right.
Palestine.
I'm Palestine, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
So only two of our relatives actually survived the Holocaust. So everyone else died and were killed. Those two cousins of my first cousins of my mother's, I can never figure out the second cousin, third cousin thing.
Me
Too
either.
confusing. Both separately walked across Europe after the end of the Second World War. One of them had been attached to the Red Army, and the other one was in a labor brigade. They were brothers. And they just happened to be on the Russian side when Germany and Russia invaded Poland. So they walked across Europe, and they actually found themselves, if you remember Exodus, in one of those displaced persons camps, interestingly enough.
Wow.
And then they came to Israel. They both fought in the 48 war. Their children also are all very proud of the fact that they were jet fighter pilots, long-range rangers. They are totally in support of the state of Israel. So consequently, we don't have a whole lot of contact.
Yeah.
For years, I verbally was very supportive of the Palestinian struggle. I've been an activist for a long time, but couldn't quite in my head sort of understand the story of my family how to put this all together.
How it fits in with the historical
Yeah,
context.
with all the things Therese has just talked about. So 3 years ago, I made myself go to the West Bank
Good for
with
you.
a group called Eyewitness Palestine.
Uh-huh.
And seeing what goes on, the apartheid roads, the destroyed homes, the fact that, the government rations water to the Palestinians, and yet the settlements have fountains and water is flowing like crazy.
And resistors have their family homes destroyed and their wells salted and their olive groves mowed down.
All those things. And I think one of the things that really disturbed me was, I've done a lot of international travel and I've crossed lots of borders. Never have I been asked my religion except in one place. And that was when we landed at the airport in Tel Aviv. And I was first in line, and I go through the whatever you call it,
Passport
and
control.
the woman looks at me and says, "Are you Jewish?"
Wow.
Which think about that. And then when we were in Bethlehem, which is on the other side of the Green Line, and came through that checkpoint, again, I watched them harass these Palestinian women. There was a Korean man who was part of our group who they gave an incredibly bad time to. I walk up to the bulletproof glass window. Woman looks at me and says, "Are you Jewish?" So just putting all those things together, I came back and just went, I cannot, as a Jewish person who believes in justice, the truth,
Human rights.
and human rights, sit idly by and just sort of mouth support, which
Yeah.
is when I joined North Coast Coalition for Palestine and met Therese.
Yeah. So North Coast
Interesting.
Coalition for Palestine.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
what would happen if you weren't Jewish? Would you have been harassed, do you think, at these border checks?
No, tourism is a big industry.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Therese.
Yeah, I was going to say that because you are Jewish, the red carpet, for you.
Yeah.
And if you wanted to live there, if you wanted today to go to Israel and live there, red carpet and even financing to live in the settlements. But I, born in Jerusalem, on my birth certificate it says Jerusalem, Palestine.
Oh, boy.
Before Israel even became a state, I have no right to return
Right.
and live there if I so choose.
So they may keep you out or harass you to come, even going in.
They just won't even allow me to
Yeah.
go in and live there, but I can go visit.
visit, yeah,
I mean,
okay.
that's why I have visited. I get a visa and I get 3 weeks, and then I have to leave.
You have to leave, yeah.
But to
You
show
know.
the perversity of the Israeli law, let's say Therese is home in Jerusalem or wherever in Ramallah. Well, if it was in Jerusalem, and there was a Palestinian living in that home today, they could be kicked out, and I, by law, could go live in their house.
That's
Really?
right. Yeah.
The law actually allows that if a home was ever owned by a Jewish person, doesn't make any difference how long ago they left, and Palestinians are now living in it, they can be removed and a Jewish person can move in.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is a part and parcel to Netanyahu, who in my estimation is a fascist rat.
Who's been indicted, by the way?
Yeah, and has a long record of, sleazy political activity with, bribes and money and favoritism. His statement recently that Israel is, by law, a state of the Jewish people, and that
And
just
for the Jewish
that
people.
just says 20% of the population is non-existent.
That's
has no
just in
rights.
Israel. That's just in Israel proper. 20% of Israel proper is Palestinian. They are supposedly Israeli citizens, but there are two
Right.
different ways of treating people.
Yeah,
there are
it's
about over
apartheid.
50 laws on the books in Israel which discriminate against the Palestinian citizens, so-called citizens
More than
in
what
Israel.
Sam was talking about with the
Yeah,
displacement.
yeah. We're not even talking about the West Bank or Gaza at this
Yeah.
point. It's just the Israeli citizens who happen to be Palestinians.
And
in
is there a
Israel.
hue and cry against this? Or is it just like business as usual in Israel? I mean, what's the protest against this? I mean,
How can there be a protest? They are under occupation. I
Yeah.
mean, in
Well,
from
and
the
I think
outside,
it's courageous to see the Gazans, with their Friday protests at the fence. Because listeners, I don't know if you're aware, but Gaza is an outdoor prison of how many people? 2 million people.
2.2 million people.
And there's, Israel, it controls all access in and out. They blockade the ocean. Egypt has one point of access, but they're hand in glove with Israel. And basically, as Sam, you were mentioning earlier before the show, the Israeli government has looked at what it would take to sustain the people in Gaza down to the calories per day per person, and they restrict the food access to under that amount. Now, that is an attempt. I mean, this is why people say this is a crime against humanity. This is why the United Nations has ruled again and again that Israel is committing war crimes and, crimes against humanity. And so for people to stand there and, use what little leverage they have, their bodies, if you would, at the border, and what they've, the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, a misnomer if there ever was one, have killed over a couple hundred people in those protests and wounded thousands more, including journalists, disabled activists, children. This is
medical
just
people.
Let's hear what you're doing now.
Yeah. So talk about what's
the
going on now.
organizations you're with and.
Yeah, can I also just jump back to one thing, because I think
sure.
it's important for people to understand that there is a peace movement, if you want to call it that, in Israel.
Good.
It's certainly shrunk.
Yeah.
And I think it's just been a very long struggle, and the country has certainly drifted very, very far to the right.
Thanks,
But there
thanks
is
Netanyahu.
a very active peace movement.
Yeah, good. And this is peace between Palestinians and the Jews.
Yes.
Okay.
Does it go under a party name or anything, Sam?
Well, there's a number of organizations, B'Tselem, which is a human rights organization. There are, I think it's Meretz is sort of the left political
there's various
party.
strains of,
but they're very, they have very few seats in parliament.
Yeah.
Right.
There are also,
But they have a small voice, at least.
there are Arabs also in the
parliament.
parliament who get treated terribly.
like crap. Yeah.
This is not to say that 100% of the Israeli citizens are against the Palestinians.
Oh,
Not
nice.
at
Okay,
all.
good.
All the times that I've been there, the group that I've traveled with, I have family there as well, but I've also traveled with groups, especially the Sabeel group, which it's like witness trips. We have made it a point to meet with Israelis who are fighting from the inside to get some recognition for for Palestinians in human rights and so on.
When you do this
So-
and you meet with these people, these groups, is it clandestine? Do you have to meet at night in this
Not
cafe?
really. Not.
Okay,
I mean,
so-
I don't know if you know who Jeff Halpern is. He's an Israeli. He's an American Israeli who we went to his office in West Jerusalem. And his whole thing is, with house demolitions, whenever the Israeli government designates a home to be demolished, he and his committee go out there and they chain themselves to the windows and the doors.
Good for them.
But they get hauled away and they're thrown in
Arrested,
jail
yeah.
for a day, and then
It's-
they get released.
it's
So,
like-
and he's Israeli. These guys are all Israelis.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's like the woman who protested and was killed by a bulldozer.
Oh
several
yes,
years ago.
Rachel Corrie.
Corrie.
Yeah,
Rachel
yeah.
Corrie.
So there,
American woman.
but that was
She's an
that
American lady.
Okay.
That's
She's
right.
a young lady.
But that was
person.
then, and Netanyahu
Yeah.
seems like his grip is getting tighter and tighter. But he's up for re-election, correct?
Yes,
Well, what-
he is.
There are lots of delegations that go to
Yes.
Israel Palestine. What's happened that's a more recent event is I don't know if you're familiar with the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement.
BDS, yes.
Okay,
Tell us
so-
about that.
Important
So,
movement.
so that, Therese, unless you want to.
Go ahead. No,
Okay.
I'll add.
Essentially, it grew out of Palestinian civil society, and it was modeled after what happened in South Africa, the boycott.
Apartheid.
Yeah. And what's happened now is that because, particularly in Europe, there have been some amazing successes on the governmental level. Israel has become quite frightened of the potential of the BDS movement. So what's happening now is known BDS activists are actually being turned away at the airport.
Wow.
And
Prevented to come
I
in.
actually know individuals who have been active in the BDS movement, sort of like myself, because this is the only thing that we have left now to fight with.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like you're talking about the Gazans who go up to the border. It's like,
Yeah.
who would do that?
Yeah.
Right.
A desperate person would do that.
Exactly.
You've lost
Desperate
everything.
people, yeah.
All you have now is your life, and you make a statement with your own body.
Well, I forget who it is, but there have been some right-wing Congress people who have tried to say, oh, well, we're going to try to outlaw the BDS movement.
Yes.
Recently, it hasn't gone anywhere, fortunately. I mean, completely
How can they do that?
unconstitutional.
20
Actually,
states.
it has gone
Yeah.
somewhere.
20 states
27.
have
27
have
states.
passed laws that some combination of make it any state employee who supports BDS can be fired, and I think one woman has actually been fired, and also any contractor. So if you think back to the South Africa days, and you looked at government contracts, you in a lot of states, including California, if you supported the South African government and did business with them, you couldn't get a state contract.
Right.
Well, there are now 27 states that have that language in it about BDS, which is an incredible violation of our right of free speech. Your right of free
Absolutely.
speech.
So who's behind all this? Is it AIPAC?
AIPAC is the
the
American
largely,
Israeli.
the large
largely
elephant.
AIPAC.
And it's not.
Right.
It isn't that simple. One of the things that
not.
people really do not understand is that the second largest group that supports the state of Israel are Christian fundamentalists.
Zionists.
Oh, yeah.
And they call themselves Christian Zionists.
Zionists.
Yeah.
And they are constantly lobbying Congress, supporting AIPAC.
Sending money. Well, then AIPAC,
Jesus was
just
born
for
there.
the listeners, AIPAC is
Bethlehem, but also working through.
It's not about that. It's so much as, from what I understand and the things that I've read, it's really the biblical, New Testament prophecy that once the third temple is built,
That's right. Then,
which would take would be in the place where Al-Aqsa Mosque
then
is.
comes the rapture.
Then
Armageddon.
comes the Messiah.
The Messiah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And so
just
this is
hold
what all
on a
the-
sec. Hold on.
So Pat
hold
Robertson-
on a sec, you guys. I want my listeners to know that
sorry.
AIPAC stands for American Israeli Political Action Committee,
Right.
and that's the group that Ilhan Omar was criticizing, and rightfully so, saying, it's about the money and the power, and they do wield extreme money and power, and they're very effective, particularly when you have billionaires like Sheldon Adelson giving, hundreds of millions of dollars to the settlers in Israel and to, Congress people that would try to pass anti-BDS legislation.
So Pat Robertson, back to him. He's
He's
one
a supporter of Israel, the state of Israel.
This was also one of the things that they were saying with George Bush with the Iraq War, that they were wanting to have this Armageddon happen because it's the beginning of the rapture. Now, they didn't mention the building of the last temple and the second Messiah, or the Messiah coming back, but it's the end times, right? Then they wanted to accelerate that.
Yeah.
So it's crazy thinking.
It is crazy thinking.
I want to go back to AIPAC because there's something
Yes.
important that people ought to know, and they could find out for themselves. There is a movie called The Lobby, which is now you can Google The Lobby, and you will get this movie, which is about the inner workings of this AIPAC
Of the
and
organization.
how the organization works. And it was an anonymous person that kind of infiltrated, he was a British guy, infiltrated the lobby, and he got in somehow and miraculously and all the inner doings. And then when the Israeli government found out about this film, they actually basically forced, I think it was Al Jazeera, not to release it through the lobby, through the AIPAC, not to release it, but it leaked. What do you call that? It kind of leaked out.
Yeah.
And now it's available on the internet.
So
it's called The Lobby.
And was
The
it
Lobby.
produced by Al Jazeera? Because
Yes.
Al Jazeera, of course, the news organization out of Qatar, I think it is, actually
Yes.
does some tremendously good reporting.
Yes.
And I'm, sorry to hear that AIPAC was able to stifle their voice in that regard.
But they haven't
Well,
because it's
remember-
been leaked.
Remember
It has
that
been leaked.
That's good.
Qatar is in bed with Trump and Kushner.
That's true.
That's
It's
right.
got that
Et cetera,
huge,
et cetera,
huge
et
military
cetera.
base there. Yeah, exactly.
So I really
Okay.
recommend, because
Good.
it
Okay.
really opened my eyes. I thought I knew some things,
Good.
but this is really
So
devastating.
So it shows the dirty tricks and the
Yeah.
and the sleazy and strong arm tactics that AIPAC deploys. Then I guess
Right, against anybody who does anything, to promote BDS,
Yeah, and
which is
this-
the only tool or tactic that we have.
And this
now.
is one of the things that just drives me crazy. It's like, if you criticize Israel, they're so trigger happy. It's like, you're anti-Semitic, you hate Jews, And it's like, even on Fox, there was seeing something a couple days ago about, one party has a problem with, anti-Semitism. It's the Democrats, right? Yeah, I mean, it's just like the criticism of Ilhan Omar. It's just like it rains crap on people because they are very organized and very well funded to do that. And that really does have an impact on our representatives in Congress.
And the whole point of that, I'm sorry.
You go ahead.
The whole point of that is to silence people so that they're not
Yes.
speaking about the issues.
Yes. Yes.
You know, you just kind of talk about Hamas and you talk about, you know, how terrible the security is in Israel and
Yeah.
they need to be
Poor
safe and
Israelis, they need more
secure.
money.
And not talk about the real issues. Why are these people doing what they're doing? Why are
Yes.
they so desperate? Why are they willing to give their bodies up, you know,
Right.
be killed like that?
Right.
And it's not just limited to Israel proper. AIPAC was a major lobbyist in support of the what I think is absurd position we've taken against Iran.
Oh,
You know, which-
absolutely.
Yeah.
And AIPAC has been extremely involved
Very
in
vocal.
the lobbying to have this militant attitude towards Iran.
And pull out of the accord we have with the
Along,
weapons.
Yes.
along with Netanyahu.
So what are you two doing to raise awareness? I know you're talking here, which is great, but how can the regular Joe Schmo and Mary Mo be more aware and actually maybe do something about this situation?
Well, I mean, I think what we try to do is basically what we're doing here. We're trying to educate people to the issues because our money, our tax dollars are really supporting
Which
Yeah.
we
what's
don't
going
aren't
on.
aware
And
of.
I feel, I mean, that we are complicit.
Yeah.
You know, we have blood on our hands
Yeah.
unless we stand up and do something.
That's right.
So, but you can't do anything about it unless you understand what the problem is.
That's right.
Exactly.
Thank you. Right.
You know,
And the
and
main-
most people do not understand
They
what
do
because the
not.
propaganda has been exactly the opposite of what the real reality
And
is.
it's been the propaganda has been persistent and consistent for decades, and
Yeah.
again,
It's
it's
deep
very
in our
well
government.
funded. Yeah,
It's
so
doing
our tax dollars are being abused to support this repression of millions of people, basically.
And Sam, you're going to Israel again.
Yeah.
right?
So Sam, you're
So-
you're going to take a trip here to Israel for what, 9 days? Tell us about this.
So I'm going to be one of 60 people, as I understand it, who are going to be involved in a nonviolent direct action campaign in the occupied territories.
Great.
And what will you do?
Sounds
What are
dangerous.
the 60 people going? What are you? What's your goal? Is it observer? Are you actually going to take?
Well, we did for security reasons. We actually don't know exactly what we're going to be doing, but I can tell you what they did 2 years ago.
Okay, yeah, sure.
Okay, so 2 years ago, 120 people went, and all of this has been organized in conjunction with local Palestinian groups in the occupied territory. So they've had a very significant role in determining what we would be doing. And Israeli peace groups have also been involved, and there will be both Palestinians and Israelis involved. So 2 years ago, it gets a little complicated. So the occupied territories are divided into 3 parts.
Okay.
And one part, the Palestinian Authority, has both police and administrative responsibility.
And real quick, Sam, the 3 parts are Gaza.
No.
Area A, Area
Oh,
B, and Area
okay,
C.
all
right.
It's really hard without a map.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Very
this is just the
confusing.
West Bank. He's not talking
Right.
about
Oh,
Gaza.
okay. All right.
And
West Bank.
basically Area A are the major cities.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay, Area B, the Israeli army provides. So you have to remember the whole of the West Bank is under martial law, even
Oh.
after since 1967.
Oh.
There is no civil
Yeah.
law for Palestinians. Israelis who live in settlements have access to regular civilian law. Anyway, not Avenue B, Area B. The Israeli army provides police services and
quote unquote.
the Palestinian Authority administers it. Area C, not Avenue C, is the largest chunk of the occupied territories. And there is one particular area that the Israeli army declared had to be cleared because they set up a weapons testing.
Cleared of
course they did.
Palestinians.
Yeah,
of course.
Now, mind you, the whole Negev Desert is within Israel proper, and there's lots of places to go shoot off rockets and bombs. But that necessitated that 19 Palestinian villages, who again can trace their existence back, generations,
Thousands.
generations,
Yeah.
they all were forced to leave, and a lot of them were ended up on land that has been chemically bombed, with Roundup,
Oh, great.
Yeah.
so that it's fallow, and people live through agriculture and sheep
Farming
herding.
and, yeah.
So 120 people, mostly from the United States, some from Europe, again, along with local Palestinians from local organizations and Israeli peace activists, went and reclaimed one of those villages.
Oh.
And I find this incredibly poignant. Apparently, many Palestinians who became refugees in 1948 still carry the keys to their houses.
Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
And so the whole procession was led by an 80-some-year-old man who had the key to his house that he hadn't lived in,
Wow.
Yeah.
for how many
The
years.
symbol.
And they set up a camp and opened some of the houses, and then the army came and, rousted everybody out. But there are still a group of Palestinian teenagers who go and occupy one of those villages on a regular basis as a result of that.
Do they move around? They occupy it until the army comes and they leave? When the army leaves, they go
Apparently
back?
the army has sort of left them alone. But one of the real dangers is not the army, it's the settlers.
Right.
And I don't know if you've heard about the settler youth.
No. The
Okay.
violence of them, I'm sure. But
We know
tell
the
us.
settlers are very fascist and brutal.
Let's hear it.
Some are and some aren't. I
Yeah.
mean, some are there for economic reasons. It's, Israel proper is very expensive, so a lot of Israelis move to the settlements because it's cheaper.
and they also get government
and they get
support for that.
subsidies.
Sure.
Yeah.
But the settlers you read about who are off setting up illegal settlements
That's
even the
right.
Israelis consider illegal. They are just fanatical, and if you want to go, just look up settler youth and watch some of the videos on YouTube. I mean, they are really scary. And one of their major tactics is what they call price tag attacks. So if they perceive that a Palestinian has done something to hurt, disrupt a Israeli Jewish person, they will burn down a mosque. They will attack and sometimes kill Palestinians.
So it's terrorism.
Yeah, exactly.
So just
And this is common. This
very
is
aggressive violence.
And the Israeli government just turns a blind eye? Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, the story of Hebron. Just really quickly.
Yeah,
So
let's hear it.
the city of Hebron. What maybe you can say something about the significance of the city, and then I could.
Al-Khalil, it's in Arabic, it's called Al-Khalil, and in the Hebrew name is Hebron, and it's where the patriarchs are buried, basically. And it's got about 150,000 Palestinians living there. And some years ago, about
18?
900 settlers came to the middle of downtown Hebron, guarded by about 1,800
Even
police.
before that, the way it actually started was 18 Israelis checked into a hotel in the middle of Palestinian Hebron.
Downtown, yeah.
Yeah.
And then they wouldn't leave.
Yeah.
And then the army came, and then 900 more settlers, and the army protects them, even though they illegally occupied Palestinian homes.
Not only protects them, but they have completely shut down all of downtown. And I have pictures of this.
Oh,
when I do
no.
my presentation, I show this.
Really?
The shops are completely closed, and the locks are welded, so you can't even open the
Wow.
shops if you wanted to.
The army
And-
did that.
And also the militant. Most of the settlers there are very militant.
Yeah.
And when Sam, you were saying it's about 20% of the settlers in the West Bank who are militant. The rest of them are what they call economic settlers, because it's cheaper to live there.
Yeah.
And if you go to what is now the main Palestinian commercial street in Hebron, they actually have put up wire, like chicken wire, over the street because the settlers throw all kinds of
Garbage.
vile substances on people. So you
Wow.
walk down the street and there's chicken wire over it.
Wow.
And
Yep.
soldiers, watching everything.
Snipers
Yeah.
and everything.
Yeah.
And let it all happen.
So as part of this trip that you're taking, you think you'll be doing some witnessing or some maybe some
No, I
marching
think
and-
we'll be doing nonviolent direct action.
Good. Yeah. And this is through the
Center-
Center for Jewish Nonviolence.
Correct.
Yeah. So this is all nonviolent activity.
So do you
On our part.
Yeah. Do you feel that because you're Jewish, that if you are arrested, if something happens, that they'll show some leniency towards you because of your religion?
Anecdotally, in talking with some of the people who organized this, that a lot of them are very religious and they speak Hebrew very fluently. So apparently, 2 years ago when I was describing what happened in that village, they could hear the officers telling the soldiers over their walkie-talkies, "Don't hurt the American Jews." Doesn't mean some people haven't been hurt,
Right.
but I'm sure they're very conscious of
The blowback. that can-
Right.
But
Yeah.
again,
Doesn't come
look at
back
what
home.
happened to Rachel Corrie.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
I forget the name of the man, the American man who was shot in
Oh,
the
yeah,
head and
from Oakland.
permanent
Oh, yeah.
permanent brain damage.
Yeah.
Who's over there
A young
protesting?
guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, there are many American Jews and other Americans who have gone to Israel, Palestine, and protested over the years. This is nothing that we're doing that's that unusual.
Uh-huh. But that takes some courage, Sam. I commend you.
Or foolishness.
Well, sometimes it's hard to tell between the two, right?
Is there hope? Is there hope?
Yeah.
Yes,
question.
I think that there is hope.
How do you see
I
that?
believe in human nature. I really do, because I think that what the Israelis are doing is not sustainable.
Yeah.
It may
think
not
you're right,
happen in
Therese.
our lifetime, but I think justice will win out. You know, it's
Yeah,
like
I
the
like
moral
that.
arc of the universe.
Yes.
Exactly.
You know,
It
and how
bends towards
long?
justice.
How long can this go on?
Yeah,
And
and-
what I'm seeing in the Palestinian people is just amazing. I mean, I'm not saying 100% of them, but the majority of them. There's a thing called sumud in Arabic.
Samud.
What is that?
SUMUD, which is perseverance, which is holding on to your ground, which is being carrying yourself in a way that you know what your truth is.
I like that.
And that's what they are really trying to do. You know, these guys and women, old and young and everybody, who are lining up at the border and being shot at.
Yeah.
This is about Samud. It's about standing for justice.
And this is
and
where-
justice is on their side.
It is.
It
And this
is,
is
right.
where existence is resistance, right?
There you go.
Yeah.
Existence
That's-
is resistance.
If Netanyahu does not get reelected, and he's
Let's
under
hope.
indictment now, so do you think this will change, or do you think it's so
Well,
ingrained
let
in the
me
government?
tell you about his opponent.
Yeah, a
Okay.
general.
Uh-oh.
His opponent is a general
Yeah.
who has been campaigning on his achievements in 2014 in Gaza. And they bombed the hell out of Gaza, in bombing, as we talked a little
right.
earlier, you know, United Nations schools and hospitals
Yeah.
and
Oh, yeah.
mosques and you know,
Places that are illegal to bomb, and they just slaughtered.
So it's out of the frying pan.
and
into the
he is
fire.
promising that if he gets in, he'll just obliterate Gaza again.
Wow. So
Wow.
This is the guy.
So I don't know if you heard last week, Trump basically told the International Criminal Court that if they bring American soldiers in Afghanistan up on war crimes, or if they bring Israelis up on war crimes, we won't allow them on American
Right.
soil. One of the people who potentially could be indicted by the ICC is Benny Gantz, who is
running against Netanyahu. So it's bad and bad.
It's
I
bad
just
and
want to
worse.
go. I just want to go back to the whole issue of is there hope? I was blown away when I went 3 years ago. We spent hours and hours every day meeting with various Palestinian groups. I mean, it was exhausting, and I just found it incredible that people, in the face of what has gone on there and how their lives have been distorted and people killed, and everybody seems to have family members who have been killed or in prison, children who are in prison,
Maimed.
and people are not giving up, and they are not going to give up.
Yeah.
It's really
Good.
inspirational.
That is inspiration.
That's the samud that I was
The samud,
talking
yeah,
about
that's right.
earlier. And you know what I failed to tell you, and you two probably know this, but in 1948, when Palestine was divided, 56% of it was supposed to become Israel, and it ended up being 78. At the end of the war, Israel had 78%
Wow.
of historical Palestine.
Wow.
20 years later, in 1967, another war broke out.
Yeah.
And the result of that war, they call it the Six-Day War,
Right.
Yeah.
Israel controls all of historical Palestine now. So that's why we say it's under occupation.
Yeah.
And nobody
And
complains about that.
up until today.
Except
you
for
know,
the
Which
it's
brings up
still-
the point of, is a two-state quote-unquote solution possible, where you have, it's such a small geographic area, and what, you're going to have a little chunk belong to this people here and this chunk over there. That just doesn't seem possible.
Is it?
Geographically, it is no longer possible. At one time, before the settlements were built in the West Bank, it
Might
may
have
have
been.
been
And then that-
possible.
It would have been
The
difficult.
settlement's not
no
going to go anywhere.
longer possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So really, this is a fight for human rights and equality.
Absolutely. And I'm not, all that I've said, I'm not against the state of Israel being there at all. I'm not against,
Yeah.
Sam is one of my dear friends. So it has nothing to do with any of that except human rights.
Right.
Human rights. Why can't the Palestinians? See, it's such an unjust situation.
It's true.
It's like their land was snatched away from them, and they are being killed every day.
Yeah.
Just this year, we are March 22nd today.
Yeah.
I wrote it down. 29 Palestinians have been killed just for no particular reason.
From January the 1st.
From
so far
January
this year.
1st until today.
Yeah.
And these are mostly young men, you know, protesting.
Yeah,
And they've been killed. And that shouldn't happen.
And nobody's being held accountable.
And nobody is being held accountable.
You're talking about Samud and the hope that you feel. It seems to me that it's not going to come from the top, that it's got to come from the bottom. And it seems what you said, there are Israelis who are interested in making the change, and there are Palestinians, of course, who want the change. There seems to be a lot of support outside of that area, too, that want this. How can all of you unite and actually have some pressure on the government?
Well, one of the things that's very heartening, and I will admit, and Therese knows this, have been rather cynical and not very hopeful, but I really have been amazed in the last year or two the number of youth in this country who really see things differently.
That is a good point.
Both Jewish and non-Jewish youth.
And not just about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, but about the politics in the United States. So maybe it's expanding, too.
Yeah.
You know, so there's that. The BDS movement, particularly in Europe, has had some incredible victories. I'm sorry, the boycott, divestment, and sanctions movement.
All right.
You know, if this was 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, and Ilhan Omar had said what she said, she would have been toast.
She wouldn't even have been elected.
That's right.
But you notice that the Democrats in the House did not target her in that final resolution. They broadened it.
And she also admitted that she needed to be educated, which is a good thing. She apologized for hurting people if she had, and then now she's being educated. But she's still sticking to her guns, and she's saying there's a difference between anti-Semitism and against the state of Israel.
Criticism of the state.
And the difference between anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism, and Zionism being an ideology, basically, that says, you know, all of historical Palestine for Jews only. And, you know, so what about the 6 million Palestinians who live there? Forget them.
Yeah.
So that's what Zionism is all about. And so what the Israeli government and its supporters have been trying to do is to equate, you know, Zionism with anti-Semitism. So if you criticize the Israeli government, its policies against the Palestinians, its human rights policies against the Palestinians, then you're anti-Semitic.
Exactly. Representative Ohan she was jumped on immediately for being anti-Semitic for what she said.
Yeah.
And then when they parsed it and they said, wait a minute, she really didn't say that after all.
She never did.
No, she never did. She had nothing to apologize for.
We can't speak the truth. Yeah. And it's the truth that will set us free.
Yeah.
And the absurdity of thinking that organized groups don't use money and power to influence Congress, you know, is in and of itself one of the most absurd things I've heard.
We live in a time where you just see the most outrageous hypocrisy and the bald-faced lies. But this is, you know, the work you guys are doing, and hopefully with a little contribution from our local radio station here, you know, we're trying to fight against that cloud of darkness, and there is light out there. Folks, we've got two special guests. It's Sam Tuttleman and Therese Mughannam, and, you know, a couple of really just wonderful pieces and parts of our community that make us a better place. And we're getting close to the top of the hour. I want to have a chance for Therese and Sam, you guys, to give us some resource contact information, like who are some good groups, or you know, how can our listeners go and find out more information here?
Well, so we do have one little group that both Sam and I belong to in Sonoma County called the what do we call it?
North Coast Coalition for Palestine. Remember, we were both born in 1947. You know, it's that time when
we'll give you
the memory is a little fleeting.
NCCP, right?
So North Coast Coalition for Palestine.
Oh, NCCFP.
And we meet twice a month on the second and fourth Mondays, and we meet at the Peace and Justice Center
in Santa Rosa.
And
is there a website or a
nccpal.org?
Okay,
what was the time?
NCCPal.
The time you said you met?
3:30 to 5.
3:30 to 5.
NCCPal.
Oh, is it PAL?
Yes,
okay.
nccpal.org.
Okay,
I'm pretty sure.
No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so the website is not that terrific, but our Facebook, you know.
Okay, so as long as it's got a way for people to connect.
Yeah.
That's good. And then, is there a local chapter of the Jewish Voices for Peace?
No, there are a lot of Jewish Voice for Peace members
in the area,
in the North Bay. The nearest chapter is the Bay Area one that meets alternatively in Oakland and San Francisco.
Okay,
very active, very large chapter.
Are they have a media presence, a social media presence, like Facebook or Twitter?
Yeah,
or something?
if you go to the national JVP website, so it's jvp.org.
JV is in Victor?
Yeah.
Yeah.
JVP.
Jewish Voice for Peace.
Okay,
.org.
jvp.org.
JVP.
And,
All right.
and they have done a lot of work, particularly in the Jewish community.
Great. Good.
Yeah, and there's a lot on the net. You know, Mondowise is a great website.
Spell that one.
Mondoweis. Mondowise.
Mondowise.
And it's Philip
Weiss.
Philip Wise, who's Jewish, who
perfect.
started this, and it's
Okay.
basically trying to bring the truth of what's going on in Palestine, Israel. And
Good.
I find that it's a great website.
Good
Okay, so
resource.
that would be mondoweiss.org also.
Yes.
So, folks, once again, MONDOWEISS
Yes.
.org. Good.
Right,
Okay.
right. There's the Electronic Intifada,
Oh, yeah.
which is
Another good
another
one.
great source. There's, of course, you mentioned the JVP.
So
There's
these are all
young,
people
you know,
to
there's
Google.
a, sorry?
These are all the ones you Google. Right?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. You Google all this,
Yeah.
and there's another one that a lot of it's really started by young Jewish people, and it's called If Not Now.
Okay.
These are the
Like
kids
that,
that are
yeah.
waking up and saying, "Not in my name,
Good.
Israel. You can't do this. I'm Jewish, and I don't
Yeah.
agree with what you're doing."
People are getting
So,
woke.
Yeah.
and they're very active. It's just talk about hope.
Yeah,
Yeah.
talk
Oh
about
my
hope.
God, there it
there's,
is.
There's
Good.
quite a movement of young people to call out the truth and speak
That's
truth
good.
to power.
Yes.
There's
and
a
many.
wonderful organization in the Bay Area called AROC. The acronym is AROC, AROC. You can Google that. It's the Arab Resource and Organizing Center. And they too have all kinds of events. If people,
Perfect.
you can.
And
we
there's
also
Sabeel.
have. Oh, there's Sabeel, of course. Duh.
It's spelled,
Christian, Sabeel, Sabeel, which is an Arabic word meaning the way,
okay.
or a bubbling stream
bubbling up.
of water.
Oh,
Okay.
nice. So it's
Pure
refreshing.
water,
and, yeah.
refreshing. And this is an organization that I actually belong to, and they do a lot of conferences, and started by a Christian. It's started by a Christian Episcopal priest who's Palestinian in Jerusalem, and it's gone international.
Beautiful. Well,
So,
folks,
yeah.
we're out of time. We're going to have you two back, Therese, Sam.
Yeah,
because it's a
take
fascinating
over.
Glad to.
subject.
Yeah.
When you come back from Israel, Sam, we'd love to get a report from on the ground.
Glad to.
And we'd certainly welcome
Therese,
you back,
you're always
Therese.
welcome
This
too.
is a,
Yeah.
this
Thank
has
you
been a
so
great
much
show.
for
Great.
having us.
Yes,
Yes.
really,
you
really
guys so
appreciate
much.
it.
This has been Two Mooks and a Mic,
All right,
folks.
guys.
Thanks.
See you in a
We'll
week.
be back next week.
All right.